put away the tray for now and work on the freeze infuse. You're using these molds. The consistency of your slurry is really, really important. There's an incredible amount of fine detail and texture in here. In order to get the powdered glass to flow, you have to add water, obviously, otherwise it's just a powder. You can't add so much water that the ratio is more water than glass, because then when the water evaporates and the piece fires, you won't actually have enough glass to hold together and fill in all these details. I use an eyedropper and put a few drops at a time. It takes a while to mix the right texture, but I find if you try to rush it and you don't get the right consistency, you get a failed piece, which takes a lot more time overall. So a little at a time, and you want it to be fluid enough to move, but not so fluid it's just going to run right off the stick. And then if you take a little chunk of it, you're going to put it in and push it and tap it to get it into all those little spots. And then just keep adding more and adding more. If you don't do that, you're going to end up with a lot of air bubbles and the piece is going to fail. And I can show you one out of the kiln that failed because I didn't put enough glass powder in the slurry. This tree just didn't have enough. It had enough in this base part. Well, actually it didn't have enough there either. You'll see where it's very thin. I don't know if you can see the light through it. There's a very thin spot right there that you can see light through. And then the top, the thin spot was so thin that it couldn't hold its shape. This was caused by simply not having enough glass powder in the slurry. Once all the water evaporated, there was really nothing in that space. This tree had just enough to hold it together, and I will probably snap off that top part because it's very, very thin. I have the tree end there. This one had enough to hold it together. It's a problem of working with these very shallow molds that were actually intended for chocolate and fondant. They work for glass, but it's a little bit trickier. I'm assuming the back legs of this deer are going to be way too thin, so he may have to be peeking out from behind a tree. But these are ready to go in the freezer, and we'll see how they turn out. When it came out of the freezer, the tree came out beautifully, but the deer did not. So I'm going to try to thaw it and put it back in. But what you need to do is pull the mold and then push, and you'll notice that, well, now that it's thawing, it's coming apart even worse. But the legs, which I thought were going to be a problem, were a problem. And also one antler was a problem. So I'm going to thaw it, put it back in, try it again. In the meantime, I'm going to make another tree. And then we'll see how it goes. Another set ready to go in the freezer. It's always a good idea to make quite a few more than you think you're going to need in case anything fails, either coming out of the freezer or going into the kiln. And when I take this out of the freezer, I don't take it out of the freezer and bring it up here to my craft room. I bring the kiln shelf down into the kitchen and put it right next to the freezer because you want to do it as quickly as you can before anything starts to thaw. So the trees work out really well. But the deer, oh my goodness, that's the number 3 and number 4 try on the deer. But they're in the kiln. So I'm going to go back with a little file and get all these little tiny bits off. But this one will work beautifully for the ornament. This one will not. He lost both of his antlers. And the trees will work just fine. Well, you can see from my misclip, my beautiful buck turned into a little buck. And in they go.